Hello everyone and welcome to another lecture for History of Journalism. I'm Professor Harper and today I'm going to talk about the U.S. media in the 1800s. It was an important century for the growth of newspapers, and let's take a look. So what happened is that technology provided the tools for mass production, mass marketing, mass advertising, and mass media. There was generally an optimistic view of the world and the United States, with some exceptions, and the newspapers, particularly toward the end of the century, emphasized pragmatism and the work ethic. There were a variety of media magnates during the time. Benjamin Day and the New York Sun. In 1833, Mr. Day introduced the penny newspaper. Horace Greeley and the New York Tribune. Greeley was well known for Go West Young Man. James Gordon Bennett and the New York Herald. Joseph Pulitzer of the Pulitzer Prizes and the New York World. Adolph Ochs in the New York Times, and William Randolph Hearst in the New York Journal. So looking at some of these, the New York Herald was established in 1835 with the leadership of James Gordon Bennett. It became the country's largest newspaper. It had a mixture of crime, business, politics, and entertainment. It was important because this was one of the first times, along with the New York Sun, where it was a mixture that went beyond business and beyond politics, and that included crime stories and entertainment. The motto was interesting: live temperately, drink moderately, eschew temperate societies, never trust a saint, go to bed at 10, rise at 6, and never buy on credit. So pragmatic work ethic. Horace Greeley was the editor of the New York Tribune. He said in 1837, "Go west, young man, go west and grow up with the country." There were an estimated 32 million immigrants that came to the United States between 1820 and 1830, and they demanded news outlets which often were in their own languages. So you saw the growth of an Italian press, a Yiddish press, a German press. But Greeley was known for embracing immigration and also for encouraging people to engage in manifest destiny and to go into other parts of the country. Joseph Pulitzer, 1847 to 1911. He was the publisher of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and then the New York World, and he became a leading figure in the Democratic Party and was even elected congressman from New York. In the 1890s, there was fierce competition between his World and William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal, and they caused both to use yellow journalism for a wider appeal. And it was sensationalistic, and there was some really bad journalism that was done during the time. There was also some very good journalism that was done during that time. William Randolph Hearst, he was, great with human interest stories, particularly the Spanish-American War in 1898, and we'll read Richard Harding Davis and the Death of Rodriguez. Stephen Crane also participated in the coverage of the Spanish-American War. In 1887, he purchased the San Francisco Examiner and then later acquired the New York Journal. He also was elected as a Democrat to the U.S. House of Representatives. He was a leading supporter of Franklin Roosevelt up until 1934, but then broke with FDR mainly because many people thought that Hearst wanted to become president of the United States. The Spanish-American War was a conflict between the United States and Spain that ended Spanish rule in the Americas and resulted in the U.S. acquisition of territories in the Western Pacific, specifically the Philippines, and Latin America. It was a war that started in the Cuban struggle for independence from Spain, which began in 1895. But there was a growing popular demand for U.S. intervention after the sinking in the Havana harbor of the battleship, the USS Maine, in 1898. This was an important turning point for the United States because by defeating the Spanish, it put the United States in in the upper echelon of countries with clout throughout the world, particularly with the acquisition of the Philippines, which became a key launching point for naval battles during World War II and U.S. bases until the 1980s. What we will see from the Spanish-American War is some great journalism by Richard Harding Davis. We are looking at another non Spanish-American War story by Stephen Crane, which An Experiment in Misery talks about his time in the Bowery in New York. But Stephen Crane is well known for his coverage of the Spanish-American War. And there was a huge battle for circulation between William Randolph Hearst of the Journal and Joseph Pulitzer of the New York World. So when it came to the end of the Spanish-American War, the U.S. Congress issued resolutions that declared Cuba had a right to independence and demanded withdrawal of Spain's armed forces. And Spain declared war on the United States in April, and the U.S. followed that declaration of war. It was a relatively short war, so Commodore George Dewey made it to the Philippines, and he essentially took the Philippines. There was an important development for Teddy Roosevelt. He became part of what's known as the Rough Riders that helped capture the land of Cuba and allowed Cuba its independence from Spain. In 1898, the Treaty of Paris forced Spain to renounce all claims to Cuba, gave Guam and Puerto Rico to the United States, and transferred sovereignty over the Philippines to the United States. So it was relatively short in terms of the battles, but it made Teddy Roosevelt's political career and also extended the reach of the United States and made the United States a world power. The United States emerged from the war as with overseas possessions, a new stake in international politics, and interestingly enough, it turned Spain away from its colonization and inward toward its domestic needs, and essentially led to a cultural and literary renaissance in Spain. Unfortunately, that changed just before World War II, and Spain became involved on the fascist side of World War II. But a war, the Spanish-American War, that you probably haven't heard much about in your studies, but an important one for journalism, an important one for the United States, and an important one for Spain. So that's a brief overview, and I hope that you've enjoyed this lecture today, and we'll see you online. Thanks very much.